Locke has this picture where we're born without any ideas, and the way we get ideas and the way we get knowledge is all through experience and sensation. In order to get an idea of a penguin, you have to go out there and experience an actual penguin, and then your sensation will put that into your mind. Now, we want to ask Locke, okay, so why? Why do you think that this is the way we get knowledge and that Plato and Descartes are wrong for thinking that we're already born with innate ideas? And so to this, Locke says, well, look, if you took an adorable little baby and just raised it in a black and white room, it wouldn't have any idea what scarlet or red looked like or what green looked like. In just the same way, like, a baby doesn't know what oysters taste like or what pineapples taste like until it has those experiences. But now, wait a second, hold on, Locke. It looks like Locke is doing the exact kind of circular reasoning that we were accusing Descartes of engaging in. He's not really giving us reasons for thinking that a baby would only have ideas of green and red and pineapple and oysters if they have experience. He's just saying, oh yeah, no, come on, clearly that's obviously what's happening. He's just saying, look, I'm going to assume from the get-go that you're only going to know what green or red looks like or what oysters or pineapples taste like if you have experiences of those things. But that's just assuming. We don't want to assume. We want some good reasons for thinking that a baby couldn't know what those things are like without experience. And so what we want to ask Locke is, well, wait a second, Locke, how do you answer some of the challenges to this sort of empiricist view that we saw both Descartes and Plato bring up? So let's take a look at some of those challenges. So Locke's got this idea that, again, you take the way you get the idea of the penguin on the blank paper of your mind on the right is by going out and experiencing an actual penguin. But we saw Descartes say, look, that's just not how you possibly could get ideas. And here's his rationale. Think of this ball of wax, or in this case, we've got this nice little cube, or what do you call that? A rectangular cube of pink wax. And Descartes says, well, look, if you relied on your sensation of that wax to get you the idea of wax, you'd be way up a creek, because all sorts of things about the sensation of that wax change over time. So we see the little gif here is just like melting the wax. So you see the wax goes from solid to liquid. So first you sense it as a solid, then you sense it as a liquid. You sense it first as being pink, and then you sense it as being clear. You sense it as being a rectangle, and then you sense it as being a puddle. You sense it as being hard, and then sense it as something that you can, just put your finger through, and as cold and as warm. And so you might ask, well, gosh, none of those sensations gives you an idea of what wax is. In fact, if you did not already have the idea of wax in your mind already, there'd be no reason to think that the stuff that you're sensing there is all the same thing. You would have every reason to believe that, oh, there used to be this solid pink rectangular cube, and now there's this new thing, this clear, warm puddle of liquid. The only way you could know that the puddle of liquid and the pink solid cube are the same thing is if you already had the idea of the wax in your mind to start with. And so that's a reason why we must think that you have these ideas innately, and you can't just pull the idea of wax merely from your sensation of it. This reasoning that we saw from Descartes, I think it's at the end of the first meditation, is very similar to the sort of reasoning that I was giving you and attributing to Plato. So here we've got another example where we know we've got an idea of a triangle in our minds. We know what triangles are, and yet I gave you some pretty good reasons to think that you have never had the experience of a triangle. Because after all, triangles are supposed to have perfectly straight lines that are infinitesimally thin. They have no thickness whatsoever. Well, gosh, There's nothing like that actually exists in our physical world, and even if there were, you wouldn't be able to see it or feel it or sense it in any real way. So it looks like there are some ideas, like our idea of a triangle, that we have in our minds, even though we've had no sensory experience of an actual triangle. So that's another reason that Plato thinks, right, we must have that idea of the triangle already inside of us. And what you want to hear from Locke is, okay, give us the alternative story. How do we get an idea of a triangle, given that it's something that we couldn't possibly have a sensation of? How do we get the idea of wax, given that the sensations we get of wax are all over the place and change? So Locke never really gives us a great answer to those questions. What he does say is like, oh, come on, babies are stupid, right? Like, no one can think that a baby is born knowing everything there is to know about the world. Babies, as he points out, they don't know simple logical truths like, well, things that exist, or it's impossible to both exist and not exist. Clearly, babies are born stupid, and then somehow they get smart. Well, what explains how they get smart? Well, they have experiences. Now, of course, Plato's got an answer to this. Plato can just say, no, they're born with all those ideas already. It's just that what experience does, it is kind of like jogs their memory. But I want to push back upon this idea of Locke in another way and say, well, wait a second, Locke, are you really sure that babies are so stupid? So you might say, oh, baby doesn't know simple logical truths like that it's impossible to both exist and not exist. But I might ask you similarly, well, do you know how long your right arm is? You probably couldn't tell me. Just like I couldn't get a baby to tell me, oh, that's what exists and that doesn't exist. It's impossible to be both. Well, you couldn't tell me exactly how many millimeters your right arm is. But if I threw an eraser at you right now, like I could do if we were back in normal times and in the classroom, you could probably catch it. Well, how do you catch it? Well, there must be some part of your mind that's able to calculate how far away from you that eraser is and at what speed it's going, and it must know exactly how long your arm is so it knows how far to stick your muscles out so that it will cross just the right distance so that your hand matches up with that eraser. So there's some part of your mind that knows how long your right arm is, even though you couldn't tell me straight up what that is. So it might be that just like you, the baby knows lots of things, it's just not able to communicate it very well. Or if Plato is right, it might know lots of stuff, it just hasn't really, thought about it. It hasn't had an opportunity to kind of remember all of the things that it knows. So it seems like for you and I, there's all sorts of things that we don't know on the tip of our tongue, we can't communicate, but we know somehow. We're able to get from one class to another, or in the case that we're in now, navigate from one Blackboard class to another by clicking on a bunch of stuff. You probably couldn't tell me how many things you need to click on to get from one class in Blackboard to another. A lot of that is because Blackboard is horrible, but you can still do it eventually. So there must be some part of your mind that kind of is keeping track of that and knows, oh yeah, this is what I need to click on in order to get from one class in Blackboard to the next one. And babies might be the same way. They might have all of these ideas, even though it doesn't seem like they do. Now, one more thing that Locke takes issue with Descartes on is he says, look, Descartes says that we are these thinking things, that it is essential to what it is to be a person that we are thinking. And so, of course, we must always be thinking, because if we weren't thinking, well, we just wouldn't exist. And Locke says, really? Because I slept a bunch last night, and I sure did not seem to be thinking during all of that sleeping. So that seems to be pretty good reason to think that Descartes is wrong, that we're always thinking. So he asks, well, look, how do we know that the soul always thinks? Now, Descartes could always come back and say, no, you were thinking all last night. You were dreaming the whole time. It's just when you woke up this morning, you had forgotten about all of your dreams. You forgot what you were thinking about. But Locke comes back and says, well, I say it's possible that the soul might not have been thinking all last night. Well, I guess that's true, so that's just kind of puts us at an impasse here, right? Like, Descartes has some reasons to think that the soul is always thinking. Locke says, well, but it might not always be thinking. But again, you might want to ask of Locke, well, okay, but why? What reasons do you have to think that we might sometimes not be thinking? And Locke doesn't seem to have a whole lot of substantive things to say in response to that. He just says, well, it's possible. So you can see there are some problems with Locke's being able to give some reasons for why he thinks that we only gain knowledge through experience. But of course, we've seen her problems with Plato's and Descartes' rationalist ideas as well.